Moat on the volley, and the corner. What a start for West Bromwich Albion. Unbelievable! West Bromwich Albion have ruined his big day.
Line again, and it's Ronan who gets the final touch, and West Bromwich Albion now have a 2-goal cushion.
The Baggies Podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Hello and welcome back to the Baggies Podcast, where of course we're giving you all the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Today we're back for another match reaction episode of the podcast, chatting today about the unfortunate 1-0 loss away at Huddersfield Town. But before we get into this episode of the podcast, be sure to subscribe, follow and get involved via our Twitter feed at the Baggies Pod, or make sure you're subscribing on your podcast platform or YouTube and leaving us a nice review or comment if you've enjoyed the episode. But for this episode, to chat through the misery of Saturday afternoon, we're joined by Ronan, who's a contributor and podcast host for WBA Report. Ronan, welcome to the show, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks, mate. I'd be feeling even better if Saturday's result had been a positive one, but nonetheless, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me on the podcast.
Yeah, absolute pleasure to have you here to make your Baggies podcast debut. But see, Ronan mentioned there that you're a contributor for WBA Report. How long have you kind of been getting into that sort of stuff over on WBA Report?
So I've been contributing now for about 18 months. In fact, the day that I joined WBA Report was the day that we got promoted after that game against QPR, which was quite symbolic, I suppose. I mean, WBA Report is older than, that involvement that I've had with them. It was initially just a Twitter account, although a very active and well-researched Twitter account that we're proud to say is the most followed kind of unofficial fan account on the platform, and that's due in large part to the hard work and dedication of Ben, who's the account admin. And WBA Report's his baby, really. He's done an excellent job with the page, and last year he expanded WBA Report from solely being a Twitter account to build in the website that we contribute to, which is www.wbareport.com, and he invited myself along with other fans and prospective journalists from within the fan base to contribute some opinion pieces, some match previews, etc., all that good stuff. And it was really enjoyable because we had the license to work on whatever we really fancied regarding the Baggies. This year there's been a bit of a change, as the new kind of academic year comes in. Some other lads have started uni, others have started working full time and whatnot. So instead of writing regular pieces, we've begun the WBA Report podcast. And for those that have listened to the podcast, you'll hear Matt, who hosts and edits the podcast, myself and Kieran as regular guests. And we have some really interesting chats about all sorts related to the club, a little bit like yourself. And it's been a lot of fun to record, honestly. It's something that we're really proud of. And whilst it's still early doors with the podcast, we're still finding our feet with it all. We have got plans to expand the pod and invite guests on soon. So if you haven't listened before, go check it out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's the WBA Report podcast, and give it a listen. But of course, only once you've finished up here and listening to this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been doing such a fantastic job starting out in the podcast world. And obviously you can find listener if you want to find Ronan and the rest of the WBA Report team's podcasts and website links, they'll be in the link in the description. But obviously, Ronan, I'm sure you'll have jollier things to talk about on your podcast previously with all the wins that we've been getting at the start of the season. But obviously a difficult defeat to Huddersfield over the weekend, a bit of a nasty one to take in from an Albion fan's perspective. Obviously, leaving us third in the table, which I suppose is, as we mentioned before, is still kind of a good thing to stay in that playoff position. But obviously going into the game, there are a few changes to the lineup. We had Taylor Gardner-Hickman coming back into the side. We had Moat returning to injury, and we had Matt Phillips going into the striking positions. What were kind of your thoughts going into the Huddersfield game, just coming in from the international break?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you see the team sheet come out, there's some interesting choices made by Val. And, I don't think I was expecting Taylor Gardner-Hickman to start ahead of Furlong. And it kind of, in a sense, at the time, I was excited by that. I thought it was a refreshing choice by Val. I think for so long, previous Albion managers, and I would say with the exception of Bilic, really, would be hesitant to start our youngsters and lean on what are essentially like virtual unknowns. And I can appreciate Val's faith in the academy. And, we'll probably keep talking about this kind of thing until the end of the season and say that he might not have brought consistently great performances on the pitch. But I have been encouraged by what I've seen off the pitch so far. But I think at the same time, you've got to credit Taylor Gardner-Hickman for taking his chance against Hull. I thought he was brilliant, and I think he earned the right to play against Huddersfield. I didn't mind the rest of the team sheet. I think Kipre's an interesting one to keep in there. So he's seen something in Kipre which he might not have seen in Semi Ajayi. But I think before a ball was kicked, I was quietly confident with the team that he put out.
Yeah, I think you echo the thoughts of a lot of the fan base there with the team that was put out. There was, it was a good mix, to be honest. By the looks of things, it was as lineups go in terms of our squad quality. That's probably one of the better ones that you certainly could have picked. But obviously, the game didn't quite pan out as we'd have liked it to. That's the 4th consecutive away loss for Albion, and I look at that and I think I tried my best, Ronan, to go through all the away games that we've had in the Championship to find when this last happened, and I got as far as about 2008 and I couldn't find it. So I'm going to just say it's the first time that's happened in the Championship for a very long time. Obviously, what were sort of your overriding thoughts on the loss at Huddersfield?
It's kind of emphasizing, I think, what we may have already known about this team, in that there's a lot of mistakes in this team. There's a lot of defensive disorganization, and there's a lack of cutting edge, bar a few moments often from Carl and Grant, and it didn't happen this weekend. But I do think that it's a real big concern that we haven't righted these wrongs on our travels. I mentioned on our own podcast that before the trip to Preventage that after our couple of losses away, I was worried this was going to become a bit of a run. It looks like it might do. But I think it's hard to know what's causing this poor run away from home. I, again, cite the defensive disorganisation, lack of cutting edge. But whatever the issues are, it feels like this poor form isn't going to be sustainable if we're actually serious about promotion this year. We've dropped points at the Hawthorns against Middlesbrough. It's really important you bounce back with some away points. It just doesn't look like happening at the moment, does it?
No, it doesn't, and it's as you said, it's a weird one because you can kind of play out some different issues in the team, and obviously we'll go through that in just a second as to where sort of tactically and personnel wise things are just being a little bit exploited by the opposition. But I remember I think it must have been under Bilic perhaps, where we were, or maybe even Allardyce actually, where we were actually quite good away from home, but as soon as we got back to the Hawthorns, things just completely went apart. But this seems like a completely different issue. The away games are just not clicking for us. That's as we said, four games on the bounce that we've lost away from home. That must be the first time we've done that in the Championship for quite a while. It's just so odd to think. Do you think maybe, Ronan, it's just the leaving the Hawthorns part where we've obviously we're packing out the away ends, as we saw yesterday, how many fans there were. Do you think it's just going into another team's territory and having not the support of the home fans on Albion's side, really?
I mean, part of me would like to believe that. I think at times our fans have, I go back to the QPR game where we were down at half time, and the fans can be quite hostile and quite reactionary to what's going on the pitch. And there has been some boos for Ismael. So part of me would like to believe that. But I think that, do you know what, it is just so hard. I feel like if you were to take it on a game by game basis and you were to look at what happened on the pitch, I can't look past like individual errors and defensive mistakes, but it seems to be happening on the road all the time. And I guess, why is that? I can't put my finger on it. It's so bizarre. I can't remember having really supported Albion during what is such a confusing time to try and unpick what I'm seeing on the pitch, but also at the same time we're third. I think before a ball was kicked this season, with all the chaos that was happening about us not hiring Chris Wilder, potentially having David Wagner as manager, I think I would have taken third. So, yeah, we're getting results without the performances. We're kind of doing all right according to the table, but this away run, I can't shed any light on it. It's really strange. I wish it was that we were just traveling away. We don't have our fans there, but I feel like it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, there's as I said, it's a game by game basis. There's just a little different thing that we see that's kind of just, and then you don't see that same issue the next game, and a different one crops up. It's almost like every single game we go through, we're just looking at different issues and kind of putting them all together. It just leads to a bit of a mess. But as you said, it leaves us third, which isn't so bad. I'd have probably taken third before. I think that's actually what I predicted us before a ball was kicked. But now I think we're only a point above Stoke in fourth place. I mean, I think Bournemouth dropped some points today, but that's still a reasonable position. I mean, the rest of the top six and possibly even top eight are catching up on us a little bit, but it's not a bad position to be in at all, is it, Ronan?
No, it's not. And I think, at times we've been spoiled as Albion fans in recent years when it comes to our championship performances. The promotion under Bilic has kind of set the standard for us now. And I think Ismael is still kind of almost living in the shadow of that. But I do just look, if you were to compare us to the other squads in the league, yeah, we've got one of the strongest sets of squads. But we've had such a massive turnover and it's such a huge change in direction under Ismael from what we have had before. It's a really kind of extreme system that the players are adapting to. And when I look at Bournemouth and I look at Fulham and the kind of football that they're playing and the kind of players that they've got in the kind of form that they are, I don't think there's any shame in being third.
No, absolutely not. I mean, we've established, I think, throughout. I mean, Bournemouth's 2-2 draw at the start season starts to look at like a really good result now. To be honest, see, Fulham didn't quite pan out that way, but you look at those two, and they're definitely stronger sides than us, outfit wise, personnel wise, and just sort of getting their style together and it working with two new managers for them. So it's working for them. But see, Huddersfield scored after only 6 minutes. It was a sort of a long straight ball down the sort of side of the defence. And that's a situation that I think, for me, is becoming a little bit of an issue for us, where this sort of high line steps up and we kind of just end up getting exploited down the side or down the middle of the defence. It happened a lot during Swansea, and that was kind of an issue that I wanted to highlight from that game. I think that obviously that's where the goal was scored, so that's where everyone will look at. But see, it's more complicated than just that issue. But I feel like that's something that may just be becoming an issue during not just these away games, but potentially all of these games so far.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like if it's not costly individual areas, it's, us getting caught in behind that's kind of starting to become our unravelling every week. I think of Andre Gray's goal, the Hawthorns for QPR, a really slow start. It's like the offside trap isn't working. We get caught, wide of the centre-backs, just inside the wing-backs. And as you mentioned, Joel Piro's equaliser for Swansea a few weeks ago, that springs to mind immediately. It is becoming a little bit déjà vu. And the goal, for those that have watched the game and the highlights, that wasn't the only time they got in behind on the weekend. Second half, Ward had a really great chance to convert after Kit Pray kind of, offered a bit of lax defending, wasn't following his man. And I'm getting a little bit sick and tired. I don't know about you. I'm getting a little bit sick and tired of watching Bartley, Kit Pray and the like sticking their hands up for offsides. And the game is just happening beyond them. So, yeah, I was frustrated. I'm frustrated at a lot of the goals we've conceded this year, but that one's got to be right up there for me because it was just so simple. Clark and Kipre are playing the offside trap and they play it really well. But on this occasion, it's Bartley and Taylor Gardner-Hickman, sadly, that are playing Ward on. It's a really nice run from him to get in behind. But if everyone was on the same page, it gets snuffed out. It is offside and it's not a goal and we can go from there. So these kind of things, a little bit of disorganisation, maybe a little bit of nerves from Taylor Gardner-Hickman on his second start. And the goal from Sinani, Taylor Gardner-Hickman's on the wrong side. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think this high line is starting to cost us. And if I were to put you on the spot, do you think it's time that we stop playing the offside trap? Is it causing us more harm than good at this point?
Yeah, I think it is. I actually think, Ronan, that it's a little more deep. I suppose it is so simple with the goals that teams are putting in against us with that ball down the side. I mean, I was just thinking about how the goal sort of came about before that ball. I mean, I think Mowat and Grant sort of shuffle. I think Grant sort of shuffles over to their wing back, and it looks like Grant's got him penned in, but he doesn't actually quite make the challenge whilst he's on the touch line. And then Mowat comes over as well and thinking, Grant's got him pinned here. We can press him and take the ball off him or knock it out for a throw-in or something. And then all of a sudden, Grant sort of backs off a little bit, gives the fullback a little bit of room. He plays it a pretty square ball into O'Brien, and O'Brien looks up, and obviously that's one of your two midfielders gone. And, Lewis O'Brien's got all this space in the world to play it in behind. So I think it kind of starts there. But then again, the high line just baffles me, the fact that two of them are playing an offside trap in, as you mentioned, in Kipre and Clark. But then it just seems like all three of the back three just sort of are staring at the linesman instead of rather than just turning around and thinking, right, if he gives it, he gives it. But if not, we'll play on. We know how long the linesmen wait to sort of give decisions for those sorts of goals. Obviously VAR's not in the Championship, but in the Premier League and stuff like that. But I think the less time that they spend looking at the linesman, the more time they can spend chasing back and potentially preventing the goal. But it just felt like they all stood still for just a second. I know that's the point of the offside trap, to catch them off, but they all just completely just planted their feet and just sort of looking at the linesman. But I think it is time to sort of to allow the back line to drop a little bit, especially in those sorts of situations when the press isn't quite as, I think, aggressive as it should be, because the more aggressive the press is and you squeeze up the pitch, whereas the press in that situation wasn't aggressive at all from I'm going to single Grant out here, but then again I could single Mo out as well for coming over and just sort of standing there really. But it was just too easy for that. I can't remember which wing back it was. It was either Turton or I can't remember. It could be the other guy.
Thomas, maybe?
Yeah, Thomas. It could have been Toffolo either.
Yeah,
to be fair.
true.
But yeah, I feel like the more aggressive the press is, the more effective that high line is. But in that situation, if you're not pressing aggressively, the ball just gets distributed through the thirds too easily, and it just leaves those back three completely exposed. And obviously with the midfield too, that's another issue in itself, which I'm sure we'll get to. But yeah, I don't know what you make of that, but I feel like the more aggressive the pressing is, the sort of easier it is to play that high line. But in that situation, the pressing wasn't intense enough to really cage Huddersfield and squeeze them up the pitch.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think pick his pass, and it is a nice pass in behind. And it kind of surprises me that the press was international together, and being naive by thinking that with that extra time that we're going to prepare better and raring to go up at the John Smiths. And I thought we would harry them all afternoon. I thought we'd make it a really difficult game. Off the back of international breaks, I actually think the longer time goes on towards, you're getting up. So in the last game against Middlesbrough, I think the players get a little bit tired in this system. And, this first game back from the international break, I was really expecting a bit more. And it just looked a bit passive. It looked a bit tepid at times. And when we won games so often, and I think of, the Bournemouth games, I know we didn't win that game, but I look at our better performances, Bournemouth, Sheffield United, where we press so well. We've scored goals where we win the ball high in the opposition's half, we catch them in transition and we let Grant or whoever else do the rest. But I'm disappointed that not for the first time we didn't execute the press well enough. And despite having the best part of 90 minutes to respond to that early goal, we couldn't convert any of the 20 shots that we put up. And, 2 of those 20 shots are on target. And that kind of tells you all you need to know. Not really necessarily about the press, but about our current striker situation. And, hemorrhaging these drop points, it's hard to look past the ineffective press and not having a goal scorer, a huge factor as to why we're dropping as many points as we are, and we're losing ground in that promotion race.
Yeah, it's such a frustrating thing, to be honest. It feels like I feel like we kind of need those sort of early goals from the opposition when we come out like that and come out and sort of saunter out onto the pitch and play a bit sort of a lethargic sort of effort towards the game. But I feel like that goal came at a good time, really. It was early in the game. You got plenty of time to chase. You got plenty of time to wake up and respond. But it just never, it sort of kicked in after about 75 minutes or so, I think, where we sort of just went, oh, here we are. Now we're playing. Now we're ready to try and get involved in and try and get a goal. But it just felt like that reaction came far too late. If we conceded after 6 minutes, I'd expect at least after about 10 minutes we go, oh, we actually need to do something here and we need to pick up the intensity and pick up the energy to try and do something. I mean, Huddersfield, I think did a decent job of stifling us, but I certainly don't think they were as good as stifling us as perhaps would have been good as good as stifling us as other teams perhaps had been this season. Yeah. I think they did okay, but they certainly weren't to the levels of somebody like Stoke. I think have probably been one of the better sides that we played this season. I think I think if we'd have really showed good energy and good intensity towards them, I thought we could have really got back into this game if we'd have shown that reaction earlier on.
Yeah, and it's no disrespect to Huddersfield, but we've beaten better teams than Huddersfield this year, and I know what you mean in that we didn't chase the game, and I feel like that's happened so many times this season. Again, I look back to Swansea, and it's like we're not playing the game that's in front of us. It's almost like, and maybe I'm just reading into this, and this isn't the case at all, but it feels like we're just trying to play the Val way, and we're trying to play a certain type of football, almost like philosophically, like there's a system that we have to stick to. And at times when things aren't working, or if the game's against us, you want them to play the game that's in front of them. You want them to make those adaptations on their own. We've got some really high quality footballers. For example, Moat, that's the kind of game where Moat can really pull the strings. He can really take the game by the scruff of the neck and put us on the front foot. And it didn't happen. And maybe I'm kind of overlooking Huddersfield in the way that they approached the game, because they weren't poor by any means. But I can't help but think that we've played better teams this year. There's been times where we've reacted better. I would think QPR, I think we came out second half and I thought we were pretty good. And it just wasn't one of those games where we took control, we fought back. And look, I mean, there was times where we were close to scoring. There was a time where Kipre was in the box and the ball was falling loose and he was turning around. He just didn't know where the ball was. And it was there for him to stab home. But he couldn't quite get on the end of it. And there's times like that, a little bit of misfortune. If it just falls our way and we can get back into the game, hey, why not? Why can't we win that game 2-1? But when you're chasing the game for that long and things aren't working out, I can imagine it's a little bit demoralising. So, yeah, it's a really tough one to take. It does feel like 3 drop points up at Huddersfield, but hey, you got to credit them. They held out well. They deserved the 1-0 in the end, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as you mentioned with Danny Ward's chance, I think it could have possibly been 2, but they could have had more chances than that. I can't quite remember, but certainly though the goal scored and obviously Danny Ward's goal as well. I think they could have added to their lead certainly, but I just feel like it's kind of other teams have got us worked out now. I feel like Huddersfield didn't quite. I thought they did well, but I didn't think they kind of stifled us or really pinned our arms behind our back as well as a team like I said Stoke had done earlier this season. I thought that they did an all right job, but I certainly think there are areas that we could have exploited. I mean, the amount of space we had in wide areas to cross the ball into, but then again we're crossing balls into somebody like Dean Garner, who's what is he 5'9" or 10, so it's a bit useless crossing it to somebody like him. So. Yeah, I feel like they didn't quite have us pinned the way that other teams did. But then again, I feel like other teams have had us pinned much, much, much easier than that. And that's when it comes down to the manager, you have to kind of make those adaptations, as you said, to change things around, just tweak it slightly to make sure that you've got this game under wrap and you're playing the game that you're facing and playing the game that's in front of you, as you said. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be coming out that way at the moment. It seems like that we're sticking to the one tactic and all of a sudden it'll work out at some point. But at the moment, it doesn't seem to be changing and it doesn't seem to be sort of shifting the game in the way that we'd like.
No, and I think I would agree for a large part of what you've said there. And I wouldn't necessarily say that I think other teams have worked us out. I think teams were clocking on to what we were doing. And actually after the Bristol City win, where we held the ball for a lot longer, I think almost like the penny dropped for Val and realised, hey, I've got some good footballers here. We've got the likes of Snodgrass and Moa and even Malumbi that can really play through the lines and that are talented with the ball at their feet. And we've got a squad that can sit on the ball and not feel like it has to be as kind of hectic and frantic as it has been earlier in the season. So the way that we were playing a little bit slower, and we've seen the possession stats rise since then, the passing accuracy stats rise. I feel like we've got this new approach. I really can't look past the fact that we don't have a goal scorer and there's no striker getting on the end of these chances. As you said, we're crossing the ball into Dean Garner. I know Hugo didn't start and Phillips is very much a makeshift striker. But you'd love to think that on another day, if we had managed to sign a player like Daryl DK, those crosses are finding somebody, it's a much better way to score. And actually, when Barnsley did so well towards the end of last season, it was because they had Daryl DK in there. They had somebody that could fit Val's plans, Val's kind of system, and we don't have that right now. So those games where we've been having a lot of the ball, there's no game winners in that team right now from a goal scoring point of view. The same way that we had Charlie Austin under Bilic, who came on obviously very famously against Blues and put those chances away. We lack that right now. We lack that difference maker. And I think, honestly, if you were to take Mitrovic out of the Fulham side, for example, or if you were to take Dominic Solanke out of that Bournemouth side, I wonder if they'd be third in the league right now. And if we get a player like that, a player of DK's ilk, and I'm a real big Daryl DK fan, you can probably tell, but if we get a player like that in January, if we can get that difference maker, I feel like we look back at these performances in a few months' time and think, if only. And I can't help but feel that's a personnel issue, maybe rather than kind of like a systemic issue with the kind of play that we're putting out there. But at the same time, Val's playing with the players that he's got, and he needs to make those kind of adaptations. And we've got to find a way to break these teams down. And otherwise, this is going to be playoffs at best this year.
Yeah, I mean, that does lead us nicely onto the next point there. I mean, I completely agree about that game changer. I mean, even if we didn't quite have that that lethal striker during, obviously you mentioned Austin, who came on and got some really important goals for us. But even if we didn't have that lethal striker, we had somebody like Mateus Pereira during the Bilic season, who, although he wasn't a striker and although he wasn't, the finisher of many chances, he was always the creator of a chance, and he was always the sort of architect of an opportunity. And even if it wasn't a clinical strike on the end, even somebody like, with the chances that Pereira is setting up, Kanu can finish, how Robson Kanu could finish those chances because they were some of them were so easy for him because of the creation that was coming behind them. So yeah, I feel like you're right there with the fact that there's always a bit of star quality in those sides, and there's always that finisher or that creator to kind of propel us through those games. And we don't seem to have that at the moment. And Daryl DK is an answer that I think a lot of Albion fans, including myself and obviously including yourself as well, that Albion want. Is it just a striker, do you think, Ronan, that we need in January, or is it a bit more complicated than just a striker, or is that just where you think that we need to improve?
I think it's a good question. So I am totally with you that we haven't replaced Mateus Pereira and we haven't replaced the chances that he creates. And I think that's partly a system thing. I think with the likes of Alex Moa and Snodgrass and Malumbi, when they're playing deeper, their role in that midfield is a lot more complicated than that. Have the license to go up the pitch and kind of play the way that Mateus did, with the kind of freedom and the license to thrill that he did. And then I'm looking at the front three and I'm looking for a creator in there. And in January, we absolutely need a goal scorer. But that, I still think that's the difference between us being in the automatic places and us not right now. It's the lack of goals. It's the lack. I mean, Hugo, every time I see him play, I think he's more and more hopeless, which is a shame because I was really rooting for him. But he's just not doing it for us at all. I can't look past the fact that we need a goal scorer, but I also look at errors that we're making at the back, and I know we've got O'Shea out, but part of me is like, we need a really safe pair of hands as part of that kind of centre-back trio, because I'm seeing more and more mistakes out of the likes of Bartley when Townsend had to shift it into the centre-half position. And full respect to Townsend, I'm glad that he got that contract extension. But he is doing a job for us at centre-half a lot of the time. And he's had mistakes. He's had clearances that have led to goals that have ultimately cost us points. So I think we need a centre-back. I think we need to improve at both ends of the pitch, honestly. But it's the centre forward that we need. If we get a creator, I'm not sure that really suits our system. But I think we've got a creator in Grady Diangana. And you know what? I'm going to maybe go on a little bit of a rant here, but I'm going to explain something to you. I think we do need to make changes ahead of the next game, right? And I really want to see Diangana on the left. I really do. I think he's the best player that we have at this level. I mean, we can reminisce about how great he was under Bilic. You remember that Swansea game where he's flicking the ball over people's heads like he's Ronaldinho, for goodness sake. Like when we signed him on a permanent, I mean, we obviously thought there was no way that we should have had a player like that. And I can't really excuse the lack of performances that he's put in on the right-hand side. I don't understand it. He's versatile enough. We paid enough money to have a player that can play on both sides. I think he's good enough. But at what point do we say that he needs to go on the left to play his best football? I mean, against Derby, the one game that he played on the left, I think he was a standout player on the pitch, even though it ended 0-0. So I would like to play Grant down the middle with the lack of strikers that we've got. I know we scored a lot of goals on the left, but I would like to play him down the middle. And I would like to see Grady get 2 or 3 games on the left, so we've got him at his best and potentially creating more chances for us. I think that's such an important part of the game, that whilst we're having 20 shots at teams like Huddersfield, 2 on target, they're clearly not clear-cut chances. We're relying on Bartley, Clark, all these players to get up from set pieces. And if we're going to create more from open play, I'd like our most dangerous and our most creative player playing in his strongest position. I think when Grant was playing down the middle, he was out of form. He didn't have the composure and he didn't have the confidence that he did. I think he needed to play on the left to find his goal scoring shoes again. But now I think it's time for him to try him down the middle. We've got Hugo, who has been, as I've said, pretty poor. And we've had Robinson, who hasn't been able to sustain domestically the kind of form that he's had internationally and the early season form that he had. So call me crazy. I want to know your thoughts on this. But I think even if we don't upgrade in the creative position in January, I think we've got someone in Grady Diangana if we just play him on his strongest left side. But yeah, what do you think? Am I going mad?
I don't think you are. I've seen I've seen a few calls like yours there that are on Twitter. People saying put Diangana on the left. That's where he ripped up trees for Albion during that that I can't remember which season, is it 1920 that under Bilic? I think that was the season where he kind of just he really went for it, and on that left hand side he looked a wizard. I remember that clip of him, what was it, juggling the ball over Carl Norton. It was ridiculous, and he was just taking the mickey out of defenders. And that goal, I remember he scored against Blackburn, where he just bypassed about 4 defenders and then just went in on goal and just looped the ball over the goalkeeper. It was amazing. I mean, that was all on the left hand side, and it feels a bit harsh on Grant because he's obviously been. I don't think his performances have been particularly complete, but he's certainly been getting the goals on that left hand side. But up front, perhaps there is a bit of a different dynamic. And my argument, if to Albion fans who say, well, Grant's not a striker, well, the strikers who are actually strikers, well, particularly Hugill, I'm looking at, haven't been doing the business up front. So surely somebody like Grant can't be any worse. And I feel like that might be a nice little combination. I'd love to see maybe a Robinson on the right hand side as well, if he can sort of pick up any form that, as you said, he's been doing for Ireland. But I don't think you're going mad, actually, Ronan. I think maybe listeners of the podcast may disagree. Obviously, let us know in the comment section or tweet me at the Baggies Pod, of course, and let me know your thoughts. But I think Diangana would do a job on the left, and I think it might just get him back to some form. He feels a bit lost, and I feel like he's been a bit narrow, sort of with his sort of run making, and a little bit of he's just creating the space. I'm not sure he's been quite as out wide as he has been. Maybe that's because he feels a little bit uncomfortable in the side that he's playing in. Yes, he can play on both sides, of course, but the left hand side is what sort of made us sign him. So maybe Val hasn't looked that far back in these sort of Albion memory box. But I feel like there's a player missing in Diangana when he's not playing on the left. And yeah, Ronan, I completely agree with you on that. But in terms of sort of the wider debate at Albion at the moment, obviously I'm going to drag up the WBA Report poll here, actually, that you put on, because obviously you got a lot of voters on that about Valerien Ismael and whether he deserves to be sacked or kept. There's been a lot of talk about it recently, and 53% said, including myself, I'll add that the poll hasn't actually finished yet, but I said give him some time, 53%, and then 47% currently saying sack him now. Ronan, where do you kind of stand on this? Because it's a big debate going on, and it's a serious one, with lots of the fan base saying he should go.
Yeah, it's a real growing debate, isn't it? And I don't necessarily like that. I'm very much in your camp that Valerien definitely needs more time, and I have been ever since his appointment, really. I don't know why I like him as much as I do. He's got some kind of hold over me because I've been a big apologist for a lot of the performances which haven't been up to standard. I think unless we just implode after January, then I'd give him at least another 12 months. That's how confident I am that he is onto something. If you kind of zoom out a little bit, he hasn't had the investment that he needs for this. Like, over the summer, like, we didn't replace Pereira. He hasn't been given the money to go and sign us a difference-making striker. This isn't his squad that he's inherited. This is, and that's a big factor when you consider how the direction that he's taking us in and how different that's been to other regimes. When he came in the summer, I think we all expected him to be a long-term appointment with the view to forming an identity at the club, which for so long we've needed. We haven't represented anything since the Pulis era. So I'm not sure about your thoughts on this, but if we don't get promoted this year, I don't see that as a huge disaster. I think it's sometimes better for teams like Bournemouth last year. Give yourself that year in the Championship. Give yourself that year to transition into something different away from what you've done before. So I want to give him time. The performances absolutely need to improve, but I mean, let's just trust the vision, look at the bigger picture, and judge him on what happens after January. Because once we've got a striker, once the system is in full swing, that's when we're going to see the best Albion. That's when we're going to see Big Val's Albion. And I do think sometimes, like with the poll, I think 47% is a crazy high number personally. I understand why people may think that, but I think that's very high. And I feel like sometimes with our fan base that Albion are only as good as their last game. And I don't necessarily think that's the best outlook for the team. I don't think that's fair on Ismael so far.
Yeah, I just feel like I know it's right to be the reaction. It's right that game yesterday had the right to have the reaction that it has, because it was a really poor performance from Albion, and we didn't look like we were gonna take any points away from that game from the moment that Huddersfield scored. For me, to be honest, I didn't think that we were just I just felt that we were completely off the pace. And to be honest, I did a little instant match reaction over on the YouTube channel, and I felt like that was I felt like I was a little bit harsh on him looking back, but then again, it is an instant match reaction. And now looking back, I think after sleeping on it, maybe was a little harsh on perhaps him, but I do think he needs to adapt a little bit with his tactics and kind of just sort of keep doing what he's doing, but and sort of tweaking it in the way that the game is going. Obviously, you mentioned how we come back to that shorter passing game, and it's kind of worked at times and did work really well against Bristol. But I feel like these tweaks need to keep coming depending on opponent. I mean, I feel like he's the kind of guy who's found his tactic and he stuck to it. And I feel like it's good that we've employed a manager who's got that philosophy and has got that. I know he says it every week, the philosophy, but sticking to that philosophy and sticking to his ways, because that's the way that he's worked with Barnsley. Yes, it was a completely different squad, and perhaps it was a squad that was more building up to him. I just feel like he does deserve that time, and as you said, we've given him that extra time and giving him perhaps another. If we don't go up, it's not a disaster, because remember under Bilic it was a 2-year plan to get us promoted, and you kind of felt that it might have needed another season. Yes, maybe a Pereira wouldn't have stayed another season because obviously he'd shown that he was far too good for the Championship. But you feel like if he has that extra season in the Championship to build, we'll be much more, if we end up going up, of course that is, we'd be much with some additions, then we'd be much more better suited to being promoted when our time does come. I'm not convinced it might be this season, but if it isn't, then it as you said, it's not the end of the world. But I feel like Albion fans have kind of just looked at previous record, looked, as you said, at the really good Championship sides we've had in the past, and we have got a better side than most in the division, because I think it's a relatively poor quality Championship this season. But I feel like if we don't get promoted this season, it's not the end of the world. And I feel like there's more to this rebuild almost, or this building up of Valerien Ismael's style of play than sort of just promotion this season. I feel like it's a very short-term vision that a lot of Albion fans are seeing compared to the long football term contractors in 4 years. I feel like that's sort of what we're building towards at the moment.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, firstly, I watched your instant match reaction yesterday, and you know what? I thought it was really fair. So I think you might be a little bit harsh on yourself. I think it's fair, and I think it's all right to feel that. And I'm certainly, as the chairman of the Big Val fan club, even I'm getting frustrated at times with the results, but in particular the lack of performances. And I think that is what is getting fans as well. You know what? If we're dropping points here and there, but it's high scoring and there's chances and we've got players that are playing well, and there are those moments that you can take from games. I mean, look at Huddersfield, look at so many games we've had this year that are ultimately forgettable, and you want to forget them as well. So we need to make sure that the performances are getting there. And I think the other thing that works against Ismael right now, and why fans are so desperate for us to get promoted again, is the result of COVID and the imbalance of quality between the teams that are at the bottom of the table and at the top. And we're fortunate that we've got a good squad compared to most teams in the league. And maybe Val hasn't been getting the best out of them. Maybe the system has kind of mitigated against some of that quality. But what I will say is that we're in a good position with parachute payments. Other teams are going to struggle to keep it. I mean, we're seeing points deduction, which is really sad. Nobody wants to see point deductions, but that's one extreme of what's going on here. There are, as you said, it's a weak league, and the league's only going to get weaker for a little bit. And we just need to be patient. We just need to give it a little bit more time. I think let's judge us after January. Let's see what the team's looking like, because I've got a feeling, I think Ismael knows as well as anyone that that's going to be the determining factor this year is what the squad's going to look like. He knows we have to get busy. He knows that we need a striker. He knows that we need difference makers in the team. And we're just at that weird kind of almost limbo point right now where it is his team, but it's not his team. It is his system, but it's not his system. We're getting results, but we're not getting results. There's going to be a big shake-up after January. That's where I have to judge him. So let's give him some time. It is a rebuild, what we're going through right now. We need to make sure that if we are going to get promoted, and I will just remind fans how brutal last year was not fun. It's that weird position that we're in where like we're too good for the Championship, and the Championship's really you forget actually when you get to the Premier League, you need to make sure that you've got a squad and you've got a system that's going to make you compete. It's all good and well having loads of the ball in the Championship like we did under Bilic, but 15, 16 teams in that league are not going to let you do that to them. So I actually think, bigger picture, the system that we play with Ismael, I think that suits the Premier League a lot better, us chasing the game, being intense, playing high lines, things like that. I think we'll see more success. But if we're going to get to the Premier League, we've just got to give him time. I really trust the vision. I really trust him. I think his face fits at the Hawthorns right now. Time is what he needs. Time's the biggest healer. But I understand that if January comes and goes and we don't have those reinforcements in places where we need them, and we're not necessarily a stronger side coming out of January, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. There's going to be a lot of pressure on him because it's an expecting fan base, but it's an even more expecting board, I think.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you actually said that about going up into the Premier League with this style of play, because I've been saying it quite a few times. I can't remember whether it's on the podcast or Twitter, and I've literally just been heckled by Albion fans because I've said the same thing as you. I've said the same thing as you. I think this style is so suited more to the Premier League than it is really the Championship. It's suited more to. I think this style not complements, but sort of rubs against a lot of the Championship styles. I think a lot of teams try to play, not perhaps to the extreme of Valball, but try and play a similar way but maybe a bit slower, but obviously physical and
100%.
and high pressing. I think it conflicts with a lot of Championship play styles, but I think in the Premier League, I think it's a different animal when, as you said, 15, 16 teams don't want you to have the ball and they want to have the ball. I think it works a lot better against those sorts of sides. You saw, I don't know if you saw the game that Barnsley played against Chelsea in the FA Cup. I think they lost 1-0, and they were brilliant, Barnsley, the way that they played. And I know they lost, but they really competed with Chelsea and they made things look really difficult for what should have been, in quality terms, a really easy game for Chelsea. But I feel like this style of play is so much more suited to the Premier League. I've said it lots of times, and I'm glad that you said it. Really, I'm relieved that there is another Albion fan in the fan base that thinks that. But yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you, Ronan, there that this style of play is it's not made for the Premier League, but it would work pretty well, I feel, in the Premier League with a bit more quality.
Yeah, and do you know what? That's the key. I think really, whatever kind of system that you play in the Premier League, you need quality. But I think of all the systems to play, a really high pressing, outworking the opposition, being direct, kind of reducing the chance of errors, playing the ball forward, kind of bypassing the midfield a little bit. As long as you've got players that can play that way, as you said, with the Barnsley Chelsea game, you're going to give teams a run for their money. It's a difficult system to against, but I think for Championship sides that also play a similar way, and we've seen how frantic some of these games have been this year, where teams have kind of matched us in the physicality. It's been chaotic. The ball hasn't really stuck. You see him passing accuracies down at 50, 60%. Nothing wants to stick. It becomes very difficult for both teams. But yeah, I think we transition far better into the Premier League under Ismael, if it is to happen. Very long way to go until that does happen, I think. Than we saw under Bilic. And you know what? As I said before, I think if we don't get promoted this year, it's really not the end of the world. I would like to see Ismael stay on. I think this is a long-term appointment. I know he's given a 4-year contract. I'd happily give him 2 full seasons. I think I really think in there. Although, will I be saying that if come February, March time we're slipping down the table, we haven't won in 7 or 8? No, I absolutely won't. But for right now, whilst we're in third, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and I want to see him given time. Yeah, I just think long term he's the best man for the job right now. I don't see an alternative out there that can provide what he is, and it's not just what happens on the pitch; it's what happens off the pitch as well. I love what he's done with the foundation so far, and I'm really encouraged by what he's doing with the academy, and that's becoming an increasing issue with Albion, that we don't handle the academy properly. And I think holistically, he's the right man for the job. I really do believe that.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. I think it's really hard to judge a manager when he's kind of dealing with another managers or managers before that squad. It's kind of really difficult to judge him on that. But Ronan, obviously Blackpool on Tuesday, another away game. We're kind of beginning to dread those now, hoping that it doesn't become 5. Hopefully it doesn't become 5 away defeats in a row. How do you feel that we can kind of combat this sort of, I know you said you can't quite put your finger on it, but how do you think that we can combat this game against Blackpool and kind of go there and with the intentions of improving?
I'd say drop the defensive line a bit, maybe abandon the offside trap maybe for a couple of games just on the road and see how that works. I would start Malumbi and Mowat, as I mentioned before, Roy Grady on the left. I'll be honest, I don't think Val can do much more in terms of the way that we're setting up if he's going to be so stubborn with his style and he's going to pursue with the 3-4-3 and the way that we're going about things. You know, the change that we've had where we start playing shorter passes and hold the ball a bit more. I think he's going in the right direction. I think this time the players have to step up. They have to take responsibility for the defensive errors that we've seen. And to be honest, the average performances, the abject performances that have cost us so far. You know, as I mentioned, I don't think there's an easy explanation for the poor form. I don't think there's an obvious quick fix either. I do feel like it takes one complete quality performance for the penny to drop again, like Bristol City, for the team to evolve. I think it could springboard us a good victory at Blackpool. I think it could springboard us to a strong run in the lead up to January. But if we're going to have a performance that kind of puts us on the right track, it's really got to happen sooner rather than later, because at the moment we are just sleepwalking our way out of the automatic promotion places. And I mean, I don't know what you'd do, Louis, but I mean, is it a quick fix? What's out there? I mean, every week that we play badly, I just can't put my finger on what's going on. So are you going to make any changes? What would you do? How do you think you can improve?
I think Malumbi and Mowat for a start. I know Livermore's obviously suspended, and it could well be, I'm not sure exactly how the rules work, but it could well be more than 3 games by the looks of things with us appealing and whatnot. But I think Mowat and Malumbi needs to happen in midfield. I think that's so energetic for what Val's trying to do. I mean, if he insists on playing the 2 in midfield, I think that's definitely, I think in terms of what the system that he's trying to ask the players to do, I think that's the best way to go about it. I think I try my best to instill that aggressive pressing that we saw in the start of the season when we haven't got the ball, keep the ball on the floor when we've actually got it. Because I saw a bit of that. Yeah, I saw a lot of that yesterday. There wasn't much hoofing up the pitches, as you said, about how we've sort of been a bit shorter with our passing. There wasn't much hoofing. So from looking at Twitter, I'm not convinced that many Albion fans have really taken a little watch of the game, to be honest, because they were just saying it was hoofball. I didn't see much hoofball. I saw a team that were trying to play a bit of football, but just couldn't quite, as you said, can't quite put my finger on it, but just couldn't quite gel and get the sort of combinations correctly between them. I feel like it just wasn't working. But then again, I suppose they've come from the beginning of the season, they were playing quite chaotic football, and now they're being asked to sort of just calm it down and sort of play a bit more patiently. But I'd certainly go for Malumbi and Mowat in midfield. I'd certainly drop the back line and just let them sort of attempt to not allow any space in behind, because that is hurting us. Yeah, I'm just thinking about who Blackpool have got. They may have some quick strikers, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, I just think it just needs to be tweaked a little bit. I feel like I'm with you, as it will work, and it will work at some point this season, and it will start to work, I hope, very soon. But it's going to be difficult, and I think, you know, Blackpool provides a really tough challenge. I think the last time we won at Blackpool away was 2010 from looking at the stats. So not looking forward to it, but I'm optimistic that things can change around, because I do have faith in the manager. And, you know, no matter what, you know, 47% of Twitter are saying, I think that he is the manager to take us forward. But Ronan, before we finish, obviously you mentioned that you're doing a lot of great stuff on WBA Report, and obviously, hopefully, Albion fans listening to this will want to hear or read a bit more from you. What would you recommend? I guess you've got so much going on: Twitter, podcasts, and website. What sort of stuff would you recommend Albion fans that are listening to the podcast should start on over at WBA Report if they haven't already?
Yeah, good question. Really fun podcast. Again, you can Spotify, on Apple. We had a lot of really good fan reaction to that. We had some really good. We had a lot. Realised that there was a very big Kyle Bartley fan in mix that managed to find his way into that best team of the 21st century. So if you want to start on a podcast, I absolutely recommend that. If you want to find my personal views, which will start to become a little bit more apparent on Twitter, I've been a little bit lax in my Twitter game recently. You can find that at Ronan T Journo, and obviously follow WBA Report if you don't already. But there's a lot of good stuff out there. Again, I'll plug the website, www.wbareport.com. I wrote, and this is all the way back in the summer before a ball was kicked, I did a little into Valerien Ismael and the kind of way that approach things, and I think actually it stands up pretty well a few months on, so I would highly recommend that you read that. Of course, a little personal plug, I'm very proud of that piece of work. A lot of research went into it, but yeah, we're doing some great stuff over at WBA Report, and I'd like to thank you for having me on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure, and hey, maybe we'll see you on WBA Report podcast. Maybe you'll be the first guest. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be more than delighted to come on the WBA Report podcast. But Ronan, make sure you go and check out all that sort of stuff from you. Obviously, I remember reading that piece about Valerien Ismael when I meant to message you for this episode. I actually, stumbled across it because it was your pinned tweet, and I remember reading it all that time ago, and it still stands. All of the stuff that's in there. So yeah, I'll drop a big list of links in the description. So anything that takes your fancy, go and check it out over on WBA Report. But a massive thank you, Ronan, for joining me on this episode. That does bring me to the end of the Baggies podcast for this week, a match reaction episode to our disappointing defeat at Huddersfield. But we're hoping for a more positive result against Blackpool. But that's enough for this episode. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.